Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Students, we did some of the hemolytic anemias yesterday. We discussed hereditary spherocytosis and G6PD deficiency. Now today we will discuss PNH, that is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, immune hemolytic anemias, and sickle cell anemia. So we have discussed this portion already. So, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. As the name indicates, paroxysm is that something. Paroxysmal nocturnal. Nocturnal, that is related to night. Disease that is related to night time. Hemoglobinuria, as the name indicates, hemoglobin disease in which there is some problem with hemoglobin. Urea means hemoglobin is released into the urine. So paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, it is due to the acquired mutation in phosphatidyl inositol glycan complementation group A gene, that is PIGA gene. You need to remember this word, PIGA. PIGA gene, P-I-G-A. P stands for phosphatidyl inositol. G stands for glycan complementation group A gene. So it's the PIGA gene that has mutation in it. So it is an acquired mutation. The GPI linked proteins are deficient, as PIGA gene codes GPI anchors, glycosyl phosphatidyl inositol anchors. So these anchors are not formed, and which leads to the proteins cannot attach to the surface of the cell. So they are characterized by complement-induced intravascular hemolysis. Now, what is the mechanism? As you can see in this picture, this is lipid bilayer. All the cells are made up of lipid bilayer. So there are some proteins that are transmembrane proteins that transverse through the cell membrane. So they are transmembrane proteins. There are some other proteins that attach to the exterior or interior surface of the lipid bilayer. So these proteins, there is something that these proteins need anchorage with. So GPI are the anchorage linkage that provides anchorage to these proteins with the lipid bilayer. So in this PNH, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, there is PIGA gene mutation in PIGA gene that encodes this GPI. Look at this GPI, this blue colored GPI. So this GPI, when there is no GPI, this protein cannot remain attached to the lipid bilayer. So now the pathogenesis, the proteins are anchored into the bilayer by two ways. As I have already told you, these are transmembrane proteins that remains transverse through the lipid bilayer, and these proteins that are attached at the exterior surface by GPI anchors. So, so these proteins are attached through a covalent linkage to a specialized phospholipid called glycosyl phosphatidyl inositol. This GPI stands for glycosyl phosphatidyl inositol. So there is deficiency of this GPI. Remember this. So PNH blood cells, so the RBCs that lack this PNH, they are deficient in these GPI linked proteins. So what happens, the three important proteins that needs GPI anchorage, they cannot attach to the cell membrane. So what are those proteins? Number one, decay accelerating factor, that is CD55. Number two, membrane inhibitor of reactive lysis, that is CD59, and CD8 binding proteins. These three proteins are the proteins that are most affected by the lack of this GPI linkage. So remember this, CD55, CD59 and CD8 binding proteins, they are deficient in these red cells of these patients. So it prevents the spontaneous activation of alternate complement pathway. Decay accelerating factor is not present, membrane inhibitor of reactive lysis is not present, and CD8 binding proteins are not present. That leads to the activation of alternative complement pathway. So look at this picture. In this, you can see this is a RBC which has a mutation in it, and it is now PNH RBC. So this PNH RBC, in this RBC, it lacks three major proteins. We have discussed CD55, CD59, and C8 binding protein. So what happens? Complement activation is there, and complement attack these RBC. So they are attacked by complement, and what happens? These RBCs are subject to hemolysis. When they get lysed, when a lot of RBCs get lysed inside blood, what happens? It leads to thrombosis, venous and arterial thrombosis. These patients present with venous or arterial thrombosis, which leads to chronic kidney disease, pulmonary hypertension. Patient becomes anemic. Patient has fatigue and impaired physical function, and there may be end organ damage in these patients. So this is a sequel. So the tendency for red cells to lyse at night is explained by a slight decrease in the blood pH during sleep. What happens actually? At first it was thought that this disease process takes place at night, but actually what happens whenever the patient gets up from sleep and he urinates, he passes red colored urine. That is, he has hematuria. So whenever the patient sleeps, whether at daytime or nighttime, patient passes urine after sleep. After waking up, it would be of red color. So what happens? It is because of decrease in blood pH during sleep. During sleep, there is depressed breathing, and this leads to decrease in blood pH during sleep. So the tendency for red blood cells to lyse at night is explained by a slight decrease in blood pH during sleep, which increases the activity of complement, and the anemia is variable but usually mild to moderate in severity in these patients. And the loss of heme iron is in the urine, and it's called hemosiderin-urea. So as you can see, iron is being lost from the body, and these patients are more prone towards anemia and particularly iron deficiency anemia, because in these patients iron cannot be recycled as it is being lost through urine. So eventually this leads to iron deficiency, which can exacerbate the anemia if untreated. So how the patient presents to you? Patient says that I have abdominal pain, I have back pain. A patient might present with thrombosis. And the most striking thing that will take you towards this diagnosis is dark colored urine or cola colored urine that that occurs after the patient has had a sleep at night or even during daytime. Easy bruisability or bleeding, headache, and shortness of breath. So the laboratory findings include, you will find hemoglobin urea. When you evaluate urine, you will get hemoglobin urea. Patient is anemic. Patient may be on peripheral smear, you may find normochromic normocytic anemia or macrocytic. Why macrocytic? Because you know, whenever there is anemia, there is hypercellular marrow in order to compensate the anemia in the peripheral blood. So whenever the bone marrow functions a lot, it releases a lot of reticulocytes into peripheral blood. So when there are a lot of reticulocytes, the size of reticulocytes is a bit larger as compared to a mature RBC. So this gives you an appearance of macrocytic anemia, but actually these macrocytes are reticulocytes in the blood. MCV might be normal or maybe higher due to these reticulocytes. A mean corpuscular volume, as you know, this is the mean volume. So it may be normal or high. Neutrophil range from normal to below 1 into 10 to raise per 9 per liters. platelet count range from normal to below. Why platelet count is low? Because in these patients thrombosis occurs and platelets are being consumed in forming a thrombosis. So these patients present with thrombocytopenia. Lymphocyte count is usually normal, but lymphopenia or increase in large granular lymphocytes may also be seen. Bilirubin is moderately increased. Why bilirubin is increased? Because there is hemolysis, and whenever there is hemolysis, bilirubin is released. Bilirubin is formed as a byproduct, and bilirubin will be moderately increased in these patients. So LDH is markedly increased. Haptoglobin is markedly decreased. I already told you what is haptoglobin. Haptoglobin is a protein formed by liver. Its action is to bind free hemoglobin. You know, hemoglobin is always present inside RBCs. So whenever there is hemolysis, there is a mechanism by Allah that there is haptoglobin always there in the blood, which binds free hemoglobin. So usually you and me, we have a normal haptoglobin levels in our blood, but whenever we get hemolysis, this haptoglobin binds free hemoglobin and the free haptoglobin levels will be low. So in these patients, this happens. They have hemolysis and haptoglobin levels get markedly decreased. So serum iron and transferrin saturation index may be decreased. Why serum iron is low? Because these patients lose iron. Instead of you and me, we always our iron is in a cycle, it is reusing, but in these patients what happens, iron is being lost in urine by hemoglobinuria. So serum iron transferrin saturation index may be decreased. Serum ferritin might be normal or it may also be decreased. Ferritin is the stored form of iron. Coombs test is negative. What does Coombs indicate? Coombs indicate any immune mediated hemolysis. So when Coombs is negative, you know there is no immune mediated hemolysis in these patients. The etiology is something else. So you get bone marrow aspirate and trephine, and it may be cellular with erythroid hyperplasia. I told you, because these patients are anemic, bone marrow is working hard to correct the anemia. So bone marrow has erythroid hyperplasia, or there may be exhaustion of bone marrow in these patients also eventually. So the bone marrow, if you can also get in some patients hypoplastic marrow or MDS like changes. It is myelodysplastic syndrome in one or more cell lineages. These are the specific tests that we do in PNH. So these are complement based tests. That is acidified serum lysis test, that is HAM test. Remember, HAM test is done in PNH. So this is a very common MCQ question. And sucrose lysis test, eventually these patients are diagnosed on flow cytometry. So these are the special tests that you need to memorize. Now, beta, we are going to start immune hemolytic anemias. What are immune hemolytic anemias? As the name indicates, hemolytic, that is lysis of blood. In anemia, that is due to lysis of blood, and that is due to immune processes. So immune mediated destruction of RBCs is called immune hemolytic anemias. They are referred as autoimmune hemolytic anemias. In these patients, Coombs test is positive. Remember, Coombs is for differentiation of immune and non-immune causes of anemias. So patients make antibodies to their own RBCs, as it is autoimmune process. So patients make antibodies to their own RBCs. So RBCs become coated with these antibodies. So these antibody coated cells are then prone to lysis by complement activation, or they are being phagocytized by reticuloendothelial system. When these coated RBCs pass through spleen, they get phagocytosed by macrophages that are present over there, and the partial loss of cell membrane, or even the full RBC can be phagocytosed, or some part of the RBC that has complement attached, it can be bitten by macrophages. So the surface area of RBC is small and it takes the shape of spherocytes. So you can see spherocytes in immune hemolytic anemias also. And then eventually, when the blood again passes through spleen, these spherocytes can get sequestered in spleen and get destroyed and lead to anemia. So immune hemolytic anemias can be classified based on the characteristics of the responsible antibody. Better remember, there can be two types of antibodies, warm antibodies and cold antibodies. Warm antibodies are always IgG antibodies. Remember, they are always IgG antibodies. Whereas cold antibodies can be of cold agglutinin type antibodies or cold hemolysin type antibodies. The cold agglutinin type antibodies are of IgM type and cold hemolysin type are of IgG type. So as the name indicates, warm antibodies act or function optimally at a high temperature, as the name indicates, warm antibodies. So they are mostly active at 37 degrees centigrade, whereas cold antibodies function below, they function optimally below temperatures of 37 degrees centigrade. So our core temperature is 37 degrees centigrade. Warm antibodies function best at warm temperatures and cold antibodies function best at below 37 degrees centigrade. So what are the causes of warm antibody type immune hemolytic anemias? They can be of primary type, idiopathic cause, or there may be secondary causes. That is autoimmune disorders, particularly systemic lupus erythematosus. And if the patient has taken certain drugs or lymphoid neoplasms, they can lead to warm type antibody, in which whenever there is 37 degrees centigrade temperature, that is our core temperature is 37, they are active. They're fully active, they're fully functional, and they cause hemolysis of blood. So cold agglutinin type are of IgM type. Cold agglutinin type are of IgM type. They are IgM antibodies and they are active below 37 degrees centigrade. So the patients that are suffering from cold antibody immune hemolytic anemias, these patients mostly present to you during winters, whenever there is peripheral body temperature is way below 37 degrees centigrade. So there, the cold agglutinin type or cold hemolysin type antibodies, they become functional and fully active at temperatures below 37. So in winters, you get these patients mostly. Cold agglutinin type, they may be acute due to mycoplasmal infections or in infectious mononucleosis, and there may be chronic disease. Due to it, chronic disease may be idiopathic or due to lymphoid neoplasms. And cold hemolysin type, they are of IgG antibodies. They are very rare and they occur mainly in children following viral infections. So beta, you need to memorize this classification. You should at least know the names. That warm type, there is a warm type antibody and there is a cold type antibody. Cold type antibody can be of cold agglutinin type or cold hemolysin type. And there is further classification. So warm antibody type autoimmune anemia, in which RBCs are coated with IgG or complement or both at the body temperature, that is 37 degrees centigrade. Less commonly, these are of IgA, they are IgA antibodies. More commonly, they are IgG antibodies. Beta, but remember, these are IgG antibodies. The drug-induced autoimmune anemias are also included in warm antibody type autoimmune anemias. Alpha-methyl dopa, which induce a warm antibody type autoimmune anemia. Penicillins also induce warm type autoimmune anemia. Now, cold hemolysin type. Cold hemolysins are autoantibodies responsible for an unusual entity known as paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. Paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. It is a very rare disorder and it is sometimes fatal. Intravascular hemolysis and hemoglobinuria occurs in these patients, and most cases are seen in children following viral infections. And the disorder is transient. Most of those affected recover within 1 month. So, beta Coombs antiglobulin test. This is very important test to differentiate between immune and non-immune causes of hemolysis. So, what is this Coombs antiglobulin test? This is the diagnosis of immune hemolytic anemia requires the detection of antibodies and or complement on red cells from the patients. So, what do we detect? We detect antibodies or and complement on the red blood cells, on the surface of red blood cells. So this test is based on the detection, basically the detection of antibodies and or complement on the red blood cells. So this is done using the direct Coombs antiglobulin test, in which the patient's red cells are mixed with sera containing antibodies that are specific for human immunoglobulin or complement. What do? We take patients' RBCs, wash them, and make to exclude all the serum. So we get, what do we get? We get washed patients' RBCs. Now, what do we add? We take commercially prepared sera. We add 2 drops of it into patients' red blood cells. So this sera contain antibodies that are specific for human immunoglobulin or complement, to check if these antibodies attach to the antigens present on the surface of RBCs or not. So these are basically antibody. So if either immunoglobulin or complement is present on the surface of the red blood cells, these antibodies cause agglutination. As soon as you add the Coombs reagent into the patient's RBCs, what happens? This causes agglutination of the patient's RBCs. So this agglutination is easily appreciated visually. So what is indirect Coombs antiglobulin test? The patient's serum is tested for its ability to agglutinate commercially available red cells bearing particular defined antigens. Now reverse is done. Patient's serum is taken and commercially prepared red cells are available. So when we add patient serum to the commercially available red cells, this test is used to characterize the antigen target and temperature dependence of the responsible antibody. Quantitative immunologic tests to measure such antibodies directly are also available. So, beta, moving towards next topic, that is sickle cell anemia. Kitna time reh gaya? Sickle cell anemia. What is sickle cell anemia? As the name indicates, sickle. Sickle is, what is sickle? बेटा सिकल उर्दू में से द्रांति कहते हैं. सिकल इज द्रांति. सो उस शेप के आरबीसीज जो हैं वो इस डिजीज में हो जाते हैं. So sickle cell anemia. There is a disease in which anemia is happening, but there is also sickling of the cells. So this is hereditary hemoglobinopathy. What happens? There is point mutation in beta globin chain that leads to the replacement of glutamate residue with a valine residue. This is a point mutation where in beta globin chain. We know hemoglobin is made up of heme part and globin part. Heme is iron, globin is protein. So this is the defect in this globin part, beta globin chain. So point mutation in beta globin chain leads to the replacement of glutamate residue with a valine residue. Remember, glutamate residue is replaced by valine residue. So the resulting abnormal sickle hemoglobin. Now the new hemoglobin structure that is formed, it's called sickle hemoglobin. Now we name it as HbS. This HbS, the combination, it is formed by alpha 2 and beta. This S stands for sickle. Beta sickle 2. 2 chains of alpha and 2 chains of sickle beta globin chain. This is responsible for the disease. As you can see, there is point mutation. What is the pathogenesis? The tendency of HBS molecule to stack into polymers when deoxygenated leads to. Now, this HBS has a special tendency. This HBS can polymerize in special circumstances. What are the special circumstances? Whenever these RBCs get deoxygenated or there is low pH, these RBCs get a new shape. They become deformed and they take a shape of a sickle. बेटा अच्छे भले ये बाइकनकेव आरबीसीज होते हैं, जैसे डीऑक्सीजनेट हुए फौरन की सिकल शक्ल इनकी होगी, ठीक है. That so this HBS has this special tendency. So the tendency of HBS molecule to stack into polymers. Now these sickle cells, they stack on each other to form a big polymer. So the tendency of HBS molecule to stack into polymers when deoxygenated leads to what happens when this deoxygenation happens? Red cell distortion. The surface of the red cell has changed. It becomes red cell distortion. Chronic hemolytic anemia. These cells can lead to chronic hemolytic anemia and microvascular occlusions. Whenever these abnormal shaped RBCs pass through capillaries, we know capillary has a very small diameter. So RBCs usually when pass through these capillaries, they deform a little. These biconcave RBCs, normal shaped RBCs, they deform a little and pass through these capillaries. What happens to this HBS? These sickle shaped cells, they cannot pass through these small vessels and capillaries. So they cause microvascular occlusions. Microvascular occlusions, and which leads to the hampering of the blood supply to the tissues and ischemic tissue damage. This leads to ischemic tissue damage. What happens? Red cell distortion occurred. Some of the cells got hemolyzed. Some did microvascular occlusions, and microvascular occlusion lead to ischemic tissue damage. So initially this process converts the red cell cytosol from a freely flowing liquid into a viscous gel. As soon as deoxygenation of the red cell occurred, the cytosol, or you can say the inside every red blood cell there is fluid portion that is called cytosol. So this cytosol, it has free fluid. The cytosol is a freely moving fluid. So this freely moving fluid becomes turns into a viscous gel. So again, we'll read it again. Initially, this process converts the red cell cytosol from freely flowing liquid into a viscous gel. So viscous gel is formed inside RBCs, and this viscous gel takes a shape of sickle, and this viscous gel forces the surface of the membrane of the RBC membrane to become sickle. With continued deoxygenation, better remember, whenever these cells again become oxygenated, they take normal biconcave shape. So these RBCs, when pass through multiple phases of oxygenation and deoxygenation, then oxygenation, deoxygenation, that is normal shape to sickle shape. Then again, when oxygenated, they become normal shape, and when again deoxygenated, they become sickle shape. So when passing through multiple phases, these RBCs, they get permanent damage. So with continued deoxygenation, HBS molecule assemble into long needle-like fibers within red blood cells. So with this phasic, eventually the RBCs they have permanent damage, and they eventually form needle-like fibers within red blood cells that produce a distorted sickle or half leaf shape. As you can see, RBC when become deoxygenated, they take a shape of sickle. Again oxygenation, it takes up again normal RBC shape. So cells with dehydration and membrane damage or deoxygenation, prolonged transit times. This leads to again sickling of the cells and sickle cells called microvascular occlusions. So sickle cells can, if they get extensive membrane damage from again this process from deoxygenation to oxygenation and again deoxygenation sickling to normal cell, then sickling to normal cell, they eventually get extensive membrane damage, and this damage is irreversible. They form irreversibly sickled cell. Now these irreversibly formed sickle cells, they are prone to hemolysis. They are eventually get hemolyzed. So in heterozygotes with sickle cell trait, about 40% of the hemoglobin is HbS and the rest is HbA. So these people lead their life very pretty much normal as compared to the homozygotes. So in heterozygotes, sickle cell, these are also sickle cell trait. 40% of hemoglobin is HbS and the rest of the hemoglobin is HbA, that is normal hemoglobin, which interface with HbS polymerization. As a result, red cells in heterozygous individuals do not sickle except under condition of profound hypoxia. Whenever they get profound hypoxia, these heterozygote cells become sickle. Otherwise, they are normal, like normal cells. So these are the factors that affect sickling. You need to remember that MCHC, what is MCHC? Mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration. If it is increased, when MCHC is increased, whenever there is dehydration, the water component of the cell is lost, so the hemoglobin becomes concentrated inside the RBCs. So due to dehydration, MCHC is increased and it favors sickling of the cells. Number two, another factor, that is intracellular pH. If there is low pH, what is low pH? That leads to acidosis. If there is acidosis, there is increased sickling by inducing deoxystate of hemoglobin. Whenever there is deoxystate of hemoglobin, the cells become sickled. Transit time. What is transit time? बेटा ट्रांजिट टाइम वो टाइम है जिसमें कैपिलरीज के अंदर से ब्लड स्लोली फ्लो करता है, तो इस पॉइंट से इस पॉइंट तक ब्लड को पहुंचने में जितना टाइम लगता है उसको ट्रांजिट टाइम कहते हैं. So for capillaries, transit time is great. So transit time, slow transit times, that is in capillaries, slow transit time also causes deoxygenation of the cells. So the cells, when passes through capillaries, they have a larger time being deoxygenated. So slow transit times leads to irreversible sickling, and vascular occlusions and hemolysis occur. Blood flow is sluggish in the normal spleen and bone marrow. Yes, again, the blood flow is also slow in spleen and in bone marrow. So there is also slow transit times, so which are prominently affecting in sickle cell disease. So in these patients, whenever there is slow transit time in spleen, what happens eventually, there are micro infarcts in spleen. There is multiple occlusions and hemolysis in spleen, which leads to the destruction of the spleen, and eventually in sickle cell anemia, patients get autosplenectomy due to multiple infarcts, multiple occlusions. These patients have autosplenectomy. Remember, whenever you get autosplenectomy in a scenario, your mind should go towards sickle cell anemia. There is nothing else in which autosplenectomy occurs except sickle cell anemia. Intravascular concentrations of HbS, there is direct relationship between amounts of HbS in RBCs and the prosperity to sickling. So effect of inflamed vessels, whenever there is inflammation, there is slow blood flow through inflamed vascular beds, and it also leads to sickling and occlusion. Cold temperatures also lead to vasoconstriction, and there is slow transit time. Again, there is increased sickling. Decreased oxygen tension, that is in hypoxia. Patient going to altitudes, they have hypoxia. So hypoxia leads to sickling, but it depends on the amount of HbS. We have already seen that heterozygotes have only 40% HbS. So protection from Plasmodium falciparum. These patients are blessed. What happens? Metabolic. These patients they are very less prone to the Plasmodium falciparum infection. What is this? This Plasmodium falciparum causes malaria. So these patients, whenever the cells have very short lifespan, so the increased load of parasite causes distortion of the cells, and these patients do not get malaria. So these are blessed people. So clinical features: vaso-occlusive crisis. Patients have painful bony pains. So the patient presents with vaso-occlusive crisis, that is painful, more frequent, sporadic, and unpredictable. They are more prone to infections, acidosis, dehydration, deoxygenation at higher altitudes, during surgery, obstetric delivery, exercise, and exposure to cold. Infarcts cause severe pain that occur in bones, that is hips, shoulder, and vertebrae. Hand-foot syndrome or dactylitis of the bones of the hands or feet, or both occur. This is very important. You should remember how hard hand-foot syndrome. This can be asked in your MCQs. Ulcers of lower legs. This is also very important clue in your scenarios. So ulcers of lower legs are very common as a result of vascular stasis and local ischemia. Acute chest syndrome. This is type of vaso-occlusive crisis involving lungs, which typically presents with fever, cough, chest pain, and pulmonary infiltrates, and leads to pulmonary inflammation, may cause blood flow to become sluggish, leading to sickling and vaso-occlusion. So the patient can also present with acute chest syndrome, in which the lungs are, there's vaso-occlusive crisis in lungs. Priapism effect, that is hypoxic damage and a loss of erection, that is erectile dysfunction in these patients. Retinopathy leading to loss of visual acuity and even blindness. And stroke may also occur in these patients. Splenic sequestration is seen in infants and presents with enlarged spleen. Beta, remember, infants can present with enlarged spleen initially, but at in adults or in older people, there is always autosplenectomy. So spleen is enlarged in infancy and early childhood, but later reduced in size due to repeated infarcts, that is autosplenectomy. As you can see, this spleen has been removed from a splenectomy has been done in a patient, and this spleen is of very small size, only hardly 4 inches of spleen, because of autoinfarcts. As you can see, these infarcts. So it can also be associated with parvovirus infection or from folate deficiency. This is characterized by fall in hemoglobin and reticulocytes, and it usually requires transfusion. This is aplastic crisis. What is hemolytic crisis? It is characterized by increased rate of hemolysis. As the name indicates, hemolytic crisis, increased rate of hemolysis and fall in hemoglobin levels. What happens whenever there is fall in hemoglobin level? There is a body response, and there is rise in reticulocytes. And what is this cause reticulocyte, increased levels of reticulocytes? Bone marrow hyperfunction. Bone marrow functions at a higher rate, and this leads to rise in reticulocytes. And it usually accompany painful crisis. What is hemolytic crisis? It is increased rate of hemolysis and fall in hemoglobin, and it is accompanied by painful crisis. How do we, what are the lab findings? On CBC, we see there is low HP, maybe 6 to 9 grams per deciliters. WBCs are elevated because these patients are prone to multiple infections due to autosplenectomy. You know, spleen is graveyard of many things. So WBC's count is elevated in these patients due to increase in mature neutrophils. Platelet count is elevated because many of the blood cells are normally sequestered in spleen. Whenever there is no spleen, all the blood cells are inside in the peripheral blood. So platelet count is elevated in these patients, that is 300 to 500 per liter, due to decreased splenic function. On peripheral sphere, you can see sickle-shaped cells. These are sickle-shaped cells. And normochromic normocytic RBCs. These normochromic normocytic. Normoblast can be seen. This polychromasia due to increased reticulocyte count. Few target cells. This is polychromasia. As you can see, this is polychromasia. and Howell-Jolly bodies. Bone marrow biopsy, there is hyperplastic marrow. There is expansion of marrow bone resorption, and secondary new bone formation is there, and there is clear-cut appearance on X-ray. You can see in this picture. Extramedullary hemopoiesis can also seen in these patients. Other lab findings include reticulocyte count may be increased up to 10%. ESR is low. Serum unconjugated bilirubin is elevated. LDH is elevated. Haptoglobin is reduced. Why? Because there is hemolysis and haptoglobin is being consumed. This is a special test of sickle cell anemia. This is sickling test. Remember sickling test. Blood and reducing agents are mixed on a slide and it is sealed, and the RBCs below it, they take the shape of sickle, and by this we identify the sickle cells and sickle cell anemia. So this is negative test, and you can see on the other side the cells are distorted and taking the sickle shape. HB electrophoresis is also important in the diagnosis, and prenatal diagnosis is possible by fetal DNA obtained through amniocentesis or chorionic biopsy. So students, this is all for today. I hope you got it. If you have any question, you can ask on the official WhatsApp group of department. Thank you.